This is our special meeting for our budget, May 20th at 4 o'clock via WebEx. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Banks.
Present.
Brightwell. Hoskins. Mandelbaum.
Present.
Frazier.
Here.
Taylor.
Here.
And Cruz.
I didn't push through.
Okay.
No, don't plug it in yet.
Madam President, we do have a quorum. We will be excusing Councilman Brightwell and Councilman Hoskins. And we do have the mayor on the line and a host of other department heads with our city administration.
Okay, thank you. Next, since this is a special meeting, we're going to go right into communications. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone on the line for communications tonight?
Madam President, I will unmute all the attendees to see if we have anyone for communications.
Thank you.
Push 3, say hello.
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 Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good afternoon. My name is Gerard Mullen, Southfield Citizens Oversight Committee, Post Office Box 155, Southfield, Michigan 48037. Tonight, I wish Madam President to talk about Section 11.18. 11.18 in the Southfield City Charter. 11.18 is entitled Amendments, which describes how this council may amend the charter in one easy step. Sad to say, this one easy step conflicts with the not so easy mandatory two-step Michigan state law known as Section 21 in the Michigan Home Rule Act of 1909, thus making Section 11.18 in the Southfield City Charter null and void. Section 11.18 became null and void way back in 1958 when the original authors of the Southfield City Charter forgot to include the second step in the state of Michigan's two-step procedure. And the two steps are: step number 1, council must, first of all, pass a proposed charter amendment. And then, step number 2, the voters must pass by ballot election council's proposed charter amendment. Sadly, Section 11.18 lacks step number 2, the ballot election, the missing step. It is about time that you folks here on this city council wake up and do yourselves a felicitous favor and fix Section 11.18, along with the many other flawed sections, by creating a city charter commission under the authority of Section 18 of the Home Rule Act. If not now, then when? If the city of Detroit can do this every 10 years, then you folks here in the city of Southfield should be able to do it at least every 63 years. If not you, then who? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Yes, we can hear you.
Good, good. Set the timer. Can you just hold one moment, Madam President?
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to read a letter that I got in the mail regarding a former councilwoman, Tanya Morris. The letter reads as follows. Greetings. This firm represents Mrs. Tanya Morris, a respected professional in the community who has spent her life building a positive reputation. We have been informed that you have been maliciously spreading inaccurate and unfounded information that is damaging to Mrs. Morris' professional and personal career. Under the laws of the state of Michigan, it is unlawful for an individual to make deliberate statements that intend to harm a person's reputation without factual information or based on hearsay. The defamatory statements included, but are not limited to, your references that Mrs. Morris engaged in pay-to-play schemes while serving
Madam
as a city
President,
council member for the city of
pause
Southfield.
for a moment.
This letter serves as our official demand.
Excuse me,
from
Ms. Gerald.
any factually
Would you
untrue
please
statements
mute
about
the
Mrs.
mic,
Morris.
please?
Failure to comply with this cease and desist.
Can we mute, please? Thank you. I'm not sure that what is taking place right here is in order. In terms of, even though Ms. Morris is a former member, this sounds like information that she can't respond to. So I don't think that we need to talk about this or hear this right now. That's just my position. And I don't know if the clerk has a perspective on this. I've never had this happen, so I'm not sure.
That would be for our city attorney. It's not for me.
I was going to say, is Dawn on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me, Madam President?
Yes. Would you
Okay.
please speak to this issue?
Yes, so as it was just stated that Councilwoman Morris is no longer on the council. And one of the things we said is that they could not speak against a council member unless it referred to how they perform their duty. So we have a situation here that Councilwoman Morris is no longer on the council. And therefore, what the speaker was reading, she's actually reading something that I think is more harm to her than Councilwoman Morris, because if I'm correct, it sounds like it's a letter advising her that she needs to cease and desist the slander that she has been speaking against former Councilwoman Morris. So at this point, if I'm correct, and she's reading a letter that was sent to her by someone speaking on behalf of Councilwoman Morris or former Councilwoman Morris in defense of what was said possibly in past venues or settings. Right now, if nothing else, it's really for the speaker to be on notice that if she continues to do this, and because Councilwoman Morris is not on the council, so there is this theory of, okay, you're a public servant and you have to listen to someone criticize you doing your job. Well, Councilwoman Morris is no longer in that position. So that letter really is warning the speaker that if she continues to do this, regardless of if Councilwoman Morris is no longer there, that it's really detrimental to her to continue to say things. I think when Councilwoman Morris was on the council, there may be I don't want to say protection, but there may have been some things that a speaker could say because it related to her performance in the position as a public servant. But what I'm hearing is that there is a cease and desist, and really that's something between her and whoever this representative is, and it's just like another citizen saying, you know, you're slandering my name, which could result in the speaker facing some legal claims against her. So that is what I'm speaking on short notice from what I just heard in the last 30 seconds or so.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that even though this is under communications, if this is not pertaining to city employees or city businesses, that we are not, we do not need to hear this at this time. So it's not an
Yes, it's
open
not
forum
pertaining
for any
to-
kind of business.
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
not pertaining to the city or the city businesses, so this is not something we should be listening to at this time.
Correct.
So,
Yes,
okay.
I'm sorry, Madam President. I wanted to preface that. I was prefacing it more upon the fact that, you know, the person was no longer sitting on council. But yes, that is the conclusion, that there's a warning to the speaker that has nothing to do with this venue at this time, and it has nothing to do with city business. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go back to communications, and sorry for the interruption, but Ms. Gerald, if you would like to continue with your under communications, you can, as long as the topic is not on the topic must pertain to city business or city employees.
Lenny, Council
Yes, hi.
President Lenny Taylor.
Yes,
You've been
yes.
on council long enough to know that communications is about whatever I want to talk about. Only public hearings, you have to adhere to what's germane to the subject that's being presented. Now you need to.
But yes, Ms. Gerald, this is the city's, excuse me, Ms. Gerald, but this is the city's meeting, and we decide what's going to be heard here or not. Yes, it is up to you to speak whatever you want, but if it's something that's contrary to what the city's business or one of the city employees, if it's hurtful, we choose not to hear that at this time.
Well, anything
that's not
that
appropriate, but it's not appropriate.
And what I'm trying to say is
it's not appropriate. And so I'm not going to go back and forth with you at this time. So if you cannot continue to talk about something germane, okay, we will mute the mic and go to the next speaker, please. I can't overtalk you on this. I'm not going to. If it's not going to pertain to something new, if it's the same topic, we're moving on to another speaker.
Hello?
Yes.
I want you to do this. That you, as the council president and the city attorney, I want you to show me in the law that says under communications, I cannot speak about what I want to talk about. And I also want you to show me in the law that says for a public hearing, I have to talk about the city or city business. And I'd like for you to get that to me as soon as possible. I'm telling you that no one on city council should be taking a campaign contribution from someone that has a project before you as a body, or someone that is in the court with the city based on their business in the city. Now prove me wrong. And I'm going to talk about this again and again and again. And then at some point in time, because I never say anything that I don't have the facts about, all you have to do is go to her campaign finance report and you'll find it yourself. Now at the next meeting, I'll give you the date. And if I'm wrong about my factual information, then I'll stop. But the proof is on the campaign finance report. And I don't appreciate you guys disrespecting me as a speaker for communications, talking about whatever I want to talk about. I am well aware of the facts that if it's a public hearing about city business, that I need to talk about what's germane to the subject. This is not a public hearing. It's communications, and I can talk about what I want, and especially if I have the facts. So I appreciate what the city attorney said, but it's no shame in my game. I got this letter, and whenever I say something, I have the facts. I intend on responding to this letter with the facts.
Okay, thank you. Your 3 minutes is up. Speaker, please.
Madam President, we do not have any more speakers.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go to this topic in our agenda, which is the discussion of the fiscal year budget.
Good evening, Council
Good
President.
evening.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Mayor, and all the city staff that have joined us, and the public, of course. This is Austin Michaels, the Director of Fiscal Services, and tonight I'm going to present the proposed Fiscal 22 budget. Madam Clerk, I do not have control of the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, Austin, what was that?
I do not have control of the PowerPoint.
Let me move it back over to you. Get 1 second. Yeah, Mr. Michaels, you just have to share your screen for us with the PowerPoint, because what we practiced earlier apparently didn't work. Welcome to technology.
Okay, well, I happen to have this on mine, so
Okay.
give me just
got control now.
to figure out how to do this. Okay, are you seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yep. Yes.
All right. Okay, so again, I'm here to discuss the proposed fiscal 22 budget for the city. So first, I'd like to take a look at where we were and where we're going. So at this time last year, the budget that we presented to council for your review was shaped by a lot of uncertainty, but we had geared it towards sustainability in response to the unknown economic impacts of the pandemic. We conservatively estimated and decreased our revenues. We set aside capital projects to protect and preserve our resources. General fund revenues, we had estimated reducing those by $2.5 million, which would have required a draw on fund balance of $1.5 million. The Parks and Recs Department reduced their revenues by just over $1 million. Luckily, they were able to reduce their expenditures by that as well. The library reduced their planned expenditures by $700,000. Our street funds had estimated reduced revenues of almost $500,000, and then across all of our funds, we pulled out $5.7 million in planned capital projects. Where we're at now and where we're planning on going for the fiscal 22 year, we are in an optimistic position. The proposed budget is a move back towards more typical operations. With continuing improvements to our service delivery model, we remain committed to providing the high level of service that our residents and our stakeholders deserve as we continue building our thriving and sustainable community. General fund revenues are projected to increase by about 3%, which includes a restoration of some of the state shared revenue. Parks and Rec is anticipating an increase of approximately $550,000. The library had put aside some capital improvements, and they are coming back with a gusto. There are some significant improvements that they are planning on doing. Our major and local street funds revenue is anticipated to increase by a modest $250,000. And we've taken a look at our capital projects that we pulled out last year and really done a reassessment on those and then included them in this budget where appropriate. So we'll start by looking at our sources of funds. And the fundamental message of this budget continues to be sustainability and responsible budgeting to maintain structural balance, preserve our flexibility, and to live within our means. So first we have a look at our property tax base, which is the primary source of our funds for operations. The city's tax base, excluding the capture districts and the expected deductions, has increased by $36.6 million or 1.4%. We're still creeping back from the Great Recession, but we're headed in the right direction. Next, we look at how that impacts our property tax rates. Overall, our tax rate is going up by about 0.3349 mils, and that is attributable to the police and fire pension, as well as the road bond levies. Over the past several years, the change in the overall rate has been primarily driven by the police and fire pension levy. That portion of the rate is based on an actuary valuation of that system or those systems that determines the required contribution from the city. We use that dollar amount calculated by the actuary to back into what the tax rate needs to be to support that. And if we go to the next slide, we can see the third line down here, the police and fire pension. The change in the current fiscal year, we're budgeted at 14.9 per the actuary. And for 22, we're budgeted at 15.9 for the actuary. And that breakdown is about 9 million for pension and 6.9 million for retiree health care for the police and fire systems. The total operating levy is expected to increase by approximately 1.75 million on the total increase of just over 1.9 million or 2.6%. Next, we'll look at the water and sewer rates as well as the sanitation or rubbish collection. A few years back when we implemented a new budgeting software specific to our water and sewer departments, we had predicted that in this year we would need about a 4% increase to the rates, and that is what we have planned for here in line with our expectations. Our sanitation, our annual rubbish collection rate has remained flat, and that is a result of cost savings realized from insourcing certain related activities, primarily our brush chipping. Next, we'll look at the state of Michigan revenues coming into us. Again, in fiscal 21, the year we're currently in, we were expecting decreased revenues from the state. And in 22, we are seeing a bit of that recovery. So our state constitutional has gone up by about 15.6% over the current year. And we've got a total increase of about 12.6% or just under $1 million. Next, we'll take a look at the other general fund revenues. On the whole, we've tried to use conservative estimates, including some decreases for changes in the expected revenues. These primarily represent revenue generated from outside sources, including those collected by the building department, the 46th District Court, and then other fees, licenses, and permits that we collect. Next, we'll take a look at the use of fund balance. Within the general fund, the only planned use of fund balance is for balances that are specifically restricted, and that's for the sanitation and the Metro Act funds. There is no budgeted use of unrestricted fund balance in the general fund. So our unrestricted fund balance is not going to be decreased based on what we're planning here. And that's important because that's the metric that the rating agencies look at. That's the policy that council adopted a couple years back to make sure that we are preserving our fund balance. Looking at other departments, the cable department continues to see a decline in revenue. They are budgeting a use of $175,000 this year, and their estimated balance at year end will be just over $100,000 left. In our library, the use of fund balance there of 2.7 million, that is primarily related to significant and much needed capital improvements and equipment upgrades. The use of fund balance in the motor pool fund, that represents prior year amounts that were accumulated for current and future year equipment maintenance and replacement. This is a good thing. This is why the fund is set up. This is just doing exactly what it should do. Next, we'll take a look at our bond funded projects. We'll start with the local street projects. We have 3 local street projects included in this budget, totaling 2.3 million. We've got Section 35 Phase 2, and that's in conjunction with some of the water work. Capital repairs for our Lockdale pump station and then again in conjunction with water, green trees. Looking at the major streets, we've got 6 different projects there, including Berg, 8 Mile to Simmons, the Northwestern Service Drive from Bell to Telegraph, Beach Road from 8 to 10 Mile, Shiawassee from Inkster to 8 Mile, 9 Mile from Evergreen to Northwestern, and 12 Mile from Losser to Evergreen. Next, we look at the water and sewer bond projects. We have 4 major projects here totaling just over 13.2 million. Section 25, areas 7 and 8. Section 35, as we saw on the local roads, same with the green trees. And then 12 Mile Losser to Evergreen in conjunction with the major roads work. And now we'll move on to looking at our uses of the funds, or the general fund expenditures. Expenditures in the general fund are primarily driven by personnel costs, and that is in line with what we would expect for a service provider, which is what the city is. We exist to provide services. I did provide council with detail of these expenditures by department, and after I get through this PowerPoint, I'm more than happy to entertain any questions that you have related to that. This is just a high-level change from where we're at in the current budget year going into the proposed next budget year. Overall, the general fund's anticipated expenditures are 81.826 million. That represents a 4.4% increase over the current year. Now we'll take a look at outside funds. In total, the increase in outside fund expenditures is primarily driven by major and local street bond funded projects and the library capital expenditures. Our total outside fund expenditures are just over 108 million, which is a 6.3% increase over the current budget year. Looking at our grant funds, these amounts are pretty consistent with the current year, which is good. That means we did not see any significant cuts in our funding related to these. I would like to point out that the Michigan Works grant and the Section 8 housing grants are both based on estimates, as we have not gotten those awards from the awarding agencies just yet. Total grant fund expenditures decreased by just under 3% from the current year. That really wraps up my high-level overview of the budget. Before we get to questions, though, I would very much like to thank my team, especially my Deputy Director, Hanan Azu, and my budget analyst, Denise Bailey, for all their efforts on this budget. Also, all of the city departments for their great efforts in bringing this together. Over the past year, we've all had to find new and innovative ways of doing things and coming together and making things work. And the other departments have just done a fantastic job with that. We've come together, we've proven our resiliency and our ability to remain Southfield strong.
Thank you, Austin. As usual, that's a great presentation. Council, I will open up for questions from you, and I will start with you, Councilman Mandelbaum.
Thank you. Were we going to go through, in more detail, or was this all that we were going to go through as a council?
I believe that's up to you.
All right. Well, as of now, I don't really have any questions, with the exception of one with the water rates. Yes. I noticed we're going up 4%.
Correct.
Can you tell me, over the last, let's say, 5 years, what percentage we've gone up over 5 years?
I can't recall over 5 years. I do know last year it was 5%. The year before that was 15%, because we did not have one prior to the year before that. So when we started implementing these changes in the water rates, and again, I'd like to remind everyone listening that the water rates are primarily driven by the cost passed through from our providers. When we took a look at this,
so do we make any, I would say, profit or any extra revenue from the water rates, or is it strictly like administratively, any extra revenue?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So no, we're not looking to make a profit here. What we are doing is looking to provide for future needs. So there is a portion of the water and sewer rates that is capital related, because we know that water and sewer does not last forever. And at some point, we're going to need to be doing repairs and maintenance and replacement. So that is built into our model.
Do you know what percentage of, so for example, if we go up 4% this year, would that reserves be what, like 0.5% or something like that?
That I don't have at the ready.
Okay. You can let me know later. That's fine.
Of course.
Okay. Currently, those are all the questions that I have right now. I may have more after, but I think I'm okay for now. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Madam President, this is
Yes.
Administrator Zorn. I just wanted to comment. We're happy to answer more direct questions, and just relative to water, let me just point out, it's as Austin Michaels has pointed out, it's the direct pass-through cost from Detroit for water, from Oakland County for sewage, and direct personnel and the cost of retiring debt associated with the capital. We do not have a very heavy administrative time. You look at a lot of cities, you'll see a chunk of the city managers, the assistant city manager. We charge primarily direct time. We do charge some indirect costs relative to accounting costs, as well as human resource costs. But comparison to the other two cities I've worked with, we are very lean in that. And I'm going to have deep water staff poll our water rates compared to our peers in Saukville. The last time I looked, we were in the lower quartile within South Oakland County. So thank you.
So Mr. Zorn, when you talked about how we're one of the lowest in Saukville, but how would that relate to the communities that are like, I know that we have adjoining communities, I think Oak Park, Huntington Woods, that are not on the same system we are. So how can we get a comparison of how we rate to the surrounding communities as well?
We can do that. And the last time I looked, Oak Park, Huntington Woods were part of the South Oakland County water system. But I'll take.
Maybe I'm thinking the Great Lakes Water Authority.
All right. Well, that's Detroit, but I could tell you, we'll look and gather as much information as we can regionally. What I know is the further north you go and the further west you go, the water rates tend to go up. What folks are paying in Southline in North Oakland County tend to be a little higher. Where their water rates different is they don't have the sewage system we have.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Hoskins?
Thank you. And Austin, thank you so much for the presentation. I just had a quick question just on the 500,000 for the increase for Parks and Rec. Do we know where that came from? The increase.
Yeah. So last year at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a great deal of uncertainty as to what was actually going to take place. So a lot of their programming was removed. And the programming is a big source of revenue for Parks and Rec. And with the, rollout of the vaccine and the change is that we are anticipating going forward, a lot of those programs were able to be put back in. Parks and Rec also did a lot of creativity to come up with ways to provide programs to our residents. And I believe it is primarily driven by that.
I'm happy about it. I was just, I'm glad, and I'm glad to see it, especially for Parks and Rec, because there was a concern because of all the programming that we thought would be compromised because of the pandemic. I'm glad to see that there was an increase, and they were able to be creative with still funding a lot of the programs that the city residents enjoy.
Thanks, Austin. This is Terry in Parks Recreation. Thanks, Austin. That is primarily the funding that we're speaking of. The other is rentals. So while we've been shut down, we've had Beachwoods as well as some of our other facilities that ordinarily receive rental funds coming in. So we are very optimistic about opening up our doors and yes, providing some innovative programming. So thank you. Thanks, Austin.
All right, thank you, Terry, for that. And that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Frazier? Councilman Frazier?
Pardon? Can you hear me?
We didn't hear you. Sorry.
I got my mic unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't do anything, so the bugs inside fixed it. Anyhow, I have several questions, but Austin, I think that was a good overview. One of the things that you mentioned was that the library delayed some capital improvements last year, and they're going to go great guns this year. My question is, do they have fund balance that will cover this, and do they expect incoming revenue to cover the capital expenses that they're going to do?
Thank you for the question. That's a great question. Yes, the library is really fortunate. They have ample fund balance. We're estimating at the end of June 30th, 21 for them to have about 8.7 million in fund balance. So while this does represent a significant use of their fund balance, at the end of 22, we're still estimating that they will have fund balance of about 5.9 million. So
okay.
The second part of your question, where they'll be paying for this with revenue, is not primarily no. No, they are not relying on revenue for this. Obviously, they have budgeted revenues, but this is really the use of the money set aside in previous years that they'll be using for these.
Okay, great. The second one is, why does the pension and benefits for the police and fire go up? And I didn't hear anything by any of the other staff people that the pensions are going to go up.
Sure. So that's related to the Act 345 that was voted on. And that requires us to fund at the actuarially recommended contribution rate. So every year or every 2 years, depending on which system we're talking, either pension or retiree healthcare, there's a new actuary evaluation performed by an outside firm, and they come back with, based on all of their information and all of the assumptions that they agree on with their respective boards, with a dollar amount that we're going to be required to contribute. And then we use that dollar amount to figure out, based on the tax base, what the levy needs to be at that point.
Okay, and while I'm on that, years ago, about 3 years ago anyhow, The state said that we had to fund pensions down the road in an OPEB. Are we on track with that? Because I know,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Zorn had to go to Lansing and explain what our program was so that they didn't come and bite us.
Yes, sir. We did have to file a corrective action plan with the state for both of our retiree healthcare funds. We did make some changes to our service delivery model specific to those funds, and we have filed with the state every year since then to show that we are on track to meet their minimum thresholds within the time frame. Upon those changes that we made to our service delivery model, the police and fire retiree healthcare met the minimum threshold. And then for our SIRS or our general employees, we are anticipating and we are on track to hit that within 5 years rather than the 25 years allowed by the state.
Okay, when you say that we hit the minimum threshold, does that mean we can't afford to stumble?
Well, it is a 40% funded level. So
Wow.
it is a relatively low bar. I mean, ideally, I would like to see that a bit higher. We are well ahead of our peers, though. In the state of Michigan, there's a requirement, there's a law that says you have to fund your pension systems. There is no such law, or prior to PA 202, there was no such mechanism by the state that said you had to fund your retiree healthcare systems. And we have been fortunate where in years past, we set aside money for that. We contributed to our healthcare system rather than just paying the costs as we go. So
Okay.
we are better positioned than our peers. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound rosier than it is, but it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, I can remember when we were so flush that it was almost embarrassing. In the Cable 15, they're being funded by PEG now.
Correct.
And it showed that PEG was down, expected to be down in 22.
Yes.
And then the revenues is like $27,000 less, and they're gobbling away at their fund balance. They're going to have like $100,000 left in the fund balance by the end of next year. Should we be putting brakes on it or something?
I think that's not a question for me, but I can say that at this rate, they will burn through their fund balance sometime in fiscal 23 and be out of funding, yes. Unfortunately, the PEG rates are decreasing and are expected to decrease into the future. Again, our costs in cable are, like many of our other departments, driven primarily by personnel. So those are not expected to decrease commensurately.
Yeah, I know there's, when I looked at the charts, I think there was a vacancy down there, but I think with the finances that we have right now, there's no way to fill that vacancy and still stay solvent. So, but that's just me thinking out loud.
Madam President?
Yes.
If I may, this is again Administrator Zorn. Interesting, the assumptions are pretty darn close to what was presented to council. I believe it was the fall of 18 or 19. And as Finance Director Michaels has indicated, the percentage continues to decrease, but recently we have gotten that locked in to 2.5%, I believe, for an additional 5 years instead of continuing to decrease. One of the largest changes is obviously as the marketplace moves to more streaming type activities. There is some discussion about the streaming activities paying some type of franchise or PEG fee, but the cable world is quickly changing.
Yes.
Cable 15 is evolving more to the multimedia platform where our product is on multiple venues, which from Apple to YouTube to streaming platforms I'm not even familiar with. We get more useful life, but the reality for us, something that started in the late 70s and in the 80s with ample revenue stream, those of us who are around negotiating those cable franchise agreements would love to go back to those days. But the reality is, as we talk about greater transparency in government, it has put greater pressure on us to continue to put more things out there. For example, 3-4 years ago, we were not broadcasting our planning and our ZBA. It's clear that the marketplace likes that. Unfortunately, I believe the reality may be that this will be something that the general fund will find itself picking up the difference. And I don't like it, but that will probably be a future conversation council will need to have.
Yeah. Thank you, both of you. The last question that I have is a two-part question. One is, in the construction program, the combined sewer, there's a job separating the combined sewers, which I understand is going to be the last combined sewer in the city. So everything will be in separate sewers. Is that correct?
If Lee Schultz can speak to that, because we may have other areas.
Correct. So this is Lee Schultz, city engineer. This is the last phase of the sewer separation that is served by that pump station that we built at the corner of 10 Mile and Pierce. So we still have many parts of the east side of the city. It's about 15% of the city that is in combined sewer district. And this sewer separation in the neighborhood, it does still feed into a county combined sewer out in 10 Mile Road. So technically it's still in the combined sewer district. They just have better protection now because within the neighborhood, the sewer and the storm is separated and it goes through that pump station, which acts as a backflow prevention. So if the county system surcharges, that can no longer back up into these neighborhoods over here that were our highest frequency basement backups, which really wasn't all that frequent. We were doing a good job with the restricted covers to control that. But this is definitely an improved level of service that we've been able to provide for these neighborhoods right here.
For the 15% that's left, do you have any projections on when we're going to be on fully separated sewers?
I think it would not be recommended at this point. The primary reason here was to minimize the risk of basement backups. We don't historically have high number of events that result in basement backups in the rest of the areas.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I'm asking this question, and Council President, please indulge me. I'm on the board of the Michigan Municipal League Foundation, and one of our major topics is community wealth building. And one of the things that we have found is that in the higher income neighborhoods in general, and I'm not just saying in Southfield, but in general, things are pretty good. They don't seem to have sewer backups. They don't have other problems, but in the less affluent neighborhoods, they do have problems, and communities aren't putting the kinds of funding into those neighborhoods to help with community wealth. And community wealth, the definition is, are the people fully accepted and treated the same in all communities or in all neighborhoods? So that's the concern that I had when I asked that question. Do we have any other neighborhoods that may be being overlooked and shouldn't be? So I don't expect an answer. I don't expect an answer. It's an open question that I just laid on the table. And the last question is associated with that, and that is, does everyone in the city of Southfield have access to water and sewer? Or do we still have some areas where the only thing we have is septic systems?
We do have some select areas that do not have access to public sewer.
Lee, how about water? Because we do have people still on wells.
But
if it's of their own choice,
Right,
or is that by not available?
if it's
I
available,
would probably, if I had to guess, I would say you could probably count on your fingers how many properties don't have access to public water.
Okay.
There's very, very few.
I would like to see a report on what areas and how many places in the city do not have access to city sewer.
Occupied properties?
Well, you're the one that said it. We got some areas. Yeah, occupied.
Yeah.
I don't think we're in a condition to spend tax money putting in sewers for places that may never be built on.
Got it. Yeah, we can put that together.
Okay. President, that's all I have at this time.
Thank you. Very good questions, Councilman. Next, we have Councilman Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Austin, for the presentation. As usual, Mr. Frazier hits all the high points, and as well as my other colleagues. So, but I did have two questions, I think. One is, do we work under 80-20 rule as when we put these budgets together, or any type of rule in terms of personnel and benefits versus expenditures?
We don't have a strict rule. The method that we use is similar to incremental budgeting and a hybrid in there with zero-based budgeting for certain lines. With our incremental budgeting, that takes into account the personnel with the expected raises or additional benefit costs. Some of our kind of locked in costs or recurring year over year costs, those would be our incremental, where we look at how do we think these are going to change. And then our zero based would be a much smaller population, but sometimes where there's larger dollar items. So when we look at our contractual and professionals, the outside services that we need to hire, the consultants, if we need those, things along those lines, we do kind of look at those from a zero-based perspective and say, yeah, you need to kind of come up with a justification for every dollar in there.
Okay, so if you had the ballpark there, what would you say are benefits and salaries versus rest of the budget? Where do you think it is?
So in the general fund, our personnel makes up, oh gosh, I thought I had that in here. Give me just 1 second. I know I have this metric here. In our general fund, personnel costs make up 72% of the general fund expenditures.
Not bad.
So 58.9 million are estimated personnel costs for FY22. So that gives us a little more than a little less 80-20, a little more wiggle room there to be responsive to the changing environment and the needs of our residents and stakeholders.
All right, that's good. And can I just ask you again too, are we still at a AA bond rating?
Correct. Yes, sir.
How do we get to a triple?
That is a question we ask the rating agency every time we talk to them.
Okay. I didn't know if there was like a certain, certain type of steps or that you had to take to get to that point, or is it just their assessment based on your books?
So there's a number of factors that go into that, and there are some things that we've implemented over the years. Earlier, I mentioned the fund balance policy. That was one of the recommendations of the rating agency, that we have an official fund balance policy. So when they say, here's something you could be doing, we're doing it. Unfortunately, part of it is the income in the surrounding communities, and that's something that we have, no control over. But that does impact our bond rating. So any
All right.
any opportunity to improve that, we are jumping on it.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President. I'm all set.
Thank you. Councilman Brightwell?
Yes, I want to excuse my tardiness, but obviously the best laid plans get disrupted by the environment. So I'm here now, but I know Austin always makes a very good presentation. But I don't have any specific questions right now. But with respect to AAA rating, that's something that we have addressed. We're trying to address on the Finance Committee. And one of the things that goes a long way toward a AAA rating is the establishment of our Finance Committee, the way it is currently structured. It actually works toward financing. And that, I know I sat in on the last bond rating meeting. This is what I used to do in my professional life. The rater, the young lady who was there representing Standard & Poor's, she appreciated the fact that we have a standard finance committee and it's structured to talk about the finances of the city. But there are steps, and we are, and the reports that we produce every month at the finance committee, that goes a long ways also to lead to what our AAA rating. But a lot of things are environmental, and I'll just relay from how difficult it is. Michigan Bell, which was one of the telephone companies in the AT&T, was the only telephone company in the United States of America that was not rated AAA. And the reason being, and that was part of my job, was to deal with Moody's and Standard & Poor's. The reason being, we were so reliant upon the automobile industry. So that was an environmental factor that we could not get around. And everybody basically know that the telephone companies are cash cows, and we could not get a AAA simply because we were tied to the automobile industry here in Michigan. But otherwise, I know Austin and his team is doing an excellent job. And some my questions are limited for tonight, and excuse my tardiness, but I wanted to make sure I got on. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Banks?
Thank you. Excellent presentation, Austin. A few questions. I noticed that there are a lot of special project advisors within the various departments. Excuse me. And in reviewing the charts, I contacted Austin earlier today to try to figure out, okay, how are we paying these people? And he had indicated that it's under the salary, wages, and temp seasonal. Do the salaries of those people include the personnel makeup of 72%? Am I making sense of what I'm saying? Like the question that Councilman Cruz asked about the personnel makeup.
Yes.
Does that also include the temporary seasonal people?
It does.
Okay, because there isn't a line item that identifies what that total number is. I'd have to go through each individual department to add that up.
Yep. So the way that I come up with the total personnel costs is based on our account structure. So the accounts that begin 1-7, those are all personnel related. So when I come up with this total, I run the report that includes only those accounts. to get the total that way. So those part-time, those non-career are included in there.
Okay, thank you. And I guess this might be a discussion for later. Somehow I'd like to see that just itemized a little bit differently, but I'm not sure how at this point. And then what about some of the vacancies that, I think there's a few vacancies right now where it's really important that we try to get them filled. I know there's quite a few vacancies, but there's a few that I feel go to the top of the list. How do we address that? And I don't know if that's a question to Mr. Zorn or
I believe those vacancies that are subject to council approval, we just reviewed with council in the last month. The library, the assessor moves to city council this coming Monday. The library's at the discretion of the library direct board. There is a interim person, the former assistant librarian is now the interim. Public Works, we're going through some internal evaluations where this is different than a few years ago. We did not have a superintendent in both water and streets, and we currently do have that bench strength. And code, we're actually evaluating the structure, whether it'll be a manager or a director. And I'm sorry, I think there's a fifth one, and looking for my notes. Code, Public Works, assessors, library. Oh, the assistant building official. That position has been posted. Those were the positions that were council, and I will tell you, if you look back, a year ago, we didn't know we were going to have an assessor's vacancy. Same with Public Works. Code was a byproduct of a promotion, and the building one, we knew that the retirement was pending there, and that position is posted.
What about some of the administrative assistant positions?
I would need to speak with HR. I think right now, at any given day, there's usually 10 to 12 positions. I don't know if HR is on. For some reason, I think the current number of vacancies is 24. I mean, I'm going to say it, from an organization that went my first 6 years with 2-3 hires to what we've done the last 6 years, I can have HR give the total number, but it's a substantial number. It's well over 100. Is James or Marie on?
Fred, this is James. In terms of the total number of vacancies, one of the factors that's driving the number of vacancies is the number of retirements that are happening right now. The employment population is getting older. Just like it's driving police and fire for us to look for more police and firemen, it's the retirements that's driving the biggest part of it. And we can give council or Councilwoman Banks a list of all vacancies and where we're at with them.
I think they were identified in, not unless there's more in the budget sheets that were presented to us. There's just a few administrative assistant positions, I think, that need to be filled sooner than later. And we can talk about that, I guess, at a different time, but I mean, that's just my own personal feeling. Also, thank you. Also, the major street projects that are being proposed, will the sidewalks and the bike paths also be addressed with these projects? I can't remember what the answer was when we discussed it earlier.
So this is Lee Schultz, city engineer, if I could respond to that.
Thanks, Lee.
It really depends on the project. So we do have some roads that have no sidewalks at all, and we do not have budget to add sidewalks and bike lanes everywhere. So, you know, as these come before council, I try and point out where we are doing some sidewalk gap filling. But it's usually just limited to gaps here and there, not necessarily adding brand new infrastructure. And that's all about dollars and cents.
What about the existing example, like you're gonna be resurfacing Berg Road? Will they also be addressing some of the problem areas for the sidewalks or bike paths at that time?
No, not typically.
All right.
So there's a separate effort that we have reviewed our non-motorized pathways. And that really just needs to be a separate line item set aside in local streets and major streets. And we have made some recommendations there, but that program still needs to get fully up and running. We have done the evaluations though on all of our bike paths.
And I want to just comment, when we did that evaluation on our pathways and that, to my knowledge, that's not something, it's not part of your typical PACER rating system or your asset management system. When that was done, we believe we were one of the first communities to do that. But Lee, if you or Terry can speak to how many miles of path and sidewalks we've added, and then if someone from Streets and Highways can speak to the size of last year's sidewalk after pretty much being on a hiatus for a good number of years. Last year we rolled that out. If I could get that number, I think, I don't know if Justin or Nagum or KT can help out with that, or Lee, if you know it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Or if, all right, is Terry Crowd on?
Hey, Fred, this is Planner Spence. This is Jeff Spence. Since we started doing infill sidewalks, shared use pathways and such, we probably have installed somewhere in the neighborhood, I thought it was close to like 12 or 13 miles
12
of additional sidewalks.
That resonates with me, 12 plus.
Yeah.
And I'll use, for example, Bell Road was a project the city had funding back in the 90s, wasn't able to make it happen, and it happened as part of that construction project. So for this council, I think you've accomplished quite a bit. Yes, there's a lot more to do. And if no one's on from Streets and Highways, last year we had a record amount of spot sidewalk replacement happen, and we will get those numbers to you.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just, thinking, and again, I'm just going to use the Berg Road project as an example. There are already sidewalks and bike paths there. However, there are sections that are either raised or are dangerous. And it just seems like at the time, since someone's already going to be out there, I don't know if it would be the business owner or the homeowner to correct that, but that would be a good time to possibly fix it, so we don't have any dangerous situations to existing older bike paths and sidewalks. Because you see a lot of people out there walking and riding, and lately I'm observing them walking and riding in the streets because some of the sidewalks are pretty rough.
Madam President, we will internally we'll have a discussion about those sidewalks and do an inspection. Obviously, the sidewalks are inspected first for from a risk mitigation standpoint, repair. We have been looking at alternative things, and I would be remiss not to point out, a tax base that decreased from 2010 of 3.6 billion to its present level about 2.5, and a 1 mil that used to be our local, what we'd call our that 1 mil is the type of thing that took care of fences and right of ways, sidewalks, litter pickup, grass cutting, and that that used to bring in 3.6 million a year. It's down to about 2,450,000 now. And you take the cumulative of 12 years or of having $1 million less to work with, you start seeing something. I was very pleased with what we were able to accomplish in a spot concrete number. And it was a substantial number, and I'm going to try to get it to you before this call's over.
Thank
May
you.
I jump in here on this topic?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
This is Ken Cyber. This has been something I've been talking about for quite some time, and I honestly I think we are wasting. There's a cheaper way to go. By just we go out and replace raised sidewalks or crumbled sidewalks. I had a lot of discussion with the former Public Works Director, and regarding can't we get some of these sidewalks fixed without replacing them through grinding them, the raised edges. And so I didn't see the bills, but if I remember correctly, Mr. Searles did Aberdeen Street because there was a handicapped resident who could not navigate the sidewalks due to the lift by roots and frost and freezing and so on. If I recall correctly, both sides of the street were done, Aberdeen from 11 to Catalpa, for about $9,000. If it had been slab replacement, it would have been thousands and thousands of more. Under my turn to speak, I was going to ask about this very same topic about sidewalks. So as long as we're on it, I thank Ms. Banks for bringing it up. I really, the city managers just told us there's less money in this fund. And I really think we need to start doing sidewalk leveling without total replacement. It will buy us time and reduce the possibility of lawsuits, trip and fall and trip, that sort of thing. And I walked after this project was done on Aberdeen. I walked it up and down both sides of the street, and there were only a few places that could not be ground because the slabs were too high up, and there wouldn't have been enough concrete left. So I just want to throw that out there. I think that this is something we should continue to invest in. Thank you.
Council President John Macrina, if I could, I would appreciate the opportunity to address that question.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council President, Council, that was addressed and discussed at the DPW leadership meeting. We've actually reviewed it more than once, and the determination that we came to, and I understand reasonable people can differ, is that sidewalks do not spontaneously jump out of the ground. When they rise, there's a reason why they rise or raise, and it's generally something like a root. And to cut off a little bit of the sidewalk that's sticking up now doesn't help because it doesn't address the reason why the sidewalk rose out of the ground, and eventually you have to do it again, and then it is too thin or narrow to cut, and you end up replacing it. The mayor's right, we are buying time, but it's probably a rather expensive way to buy time, and I think in the long run, the decision that we came to was that you're better off just taking that flag out, finding why it raised up like that, and then replacing it.
In all due respect, Mr. Macrina, I'll have to differ. I have a different opinion. A lot of these slabs, they don't yes, there are roots underneath them, but at the pace that we have been addressing sidewalk repairs, this got sidewalks, three blocks, a half a mile of one street, both sides, done for $9,000. And it wouldn't have happened that fast. Thank you for saying we can have a difference of opinion. I do have a difference of opinion on this. And I have residents that keep asking me, when's it going to be fixed in front of my house? I get those calls, perhaps you do too, but I really think this is something we need to pursue, my opinion. Thank you.
Understandable, sir. And Justin does inform me he anticipates repairing all city responsible sidewalks this season. So hopefully that will help cut down on those calls.
Thank you. Councilwoman Banks, did you have any more questions or comments?
Yes, and if I wasn't clear, I apologize. I was referring to sections, not like a whole mile sidewalk. And I probably was using the wrong word, like leveling. And I agree with what the mayor is saying. I just think there's certain areas that need to be evaluated because they are dangerous. And I don't know if some of the responsibility is ours, or would it be the businesses that the sidewalks are in front of? That's also another question. But I hope we can address it this year. Also, why was there a large expenditure increase in the planning department budget? I'm not sure if I was clear on that one.
Austin, is that your Metro Act contribution? I'm guessing.
It was like a 90%.
Sorry about that. Somehow I slipped back to mute. Yes, thank you for that question, Councilwoman Banks. In the planning department, we have budgeted in FY22 $600,000 use of Metro Act funds.
Okay.
And that is restricted to right-of-way restoration and improvement. And that is something that we can't use those funds for anything else. So that is what we're planning on doing this year.
Again, I could add to that. Council will remember that we had a review by the planning department of bus shelters, entrance markers, signage, all in the right-of-way. That did not make it into last year's budget because of COVID concerns. So this, as the budget director Michaels has said, this is an appropriate use. And the planning department has done an extensive study on our bus shelters, and some of them don't even have there's a sign that SMART or DDOT has put up, but there's nothing to stand on. So it's about concrete for perhaps adding a shelter.
Yes, and I remember the discussion. Thank you. I forgot. So thank you for the clarification. I have no further questions, Council President. Thank you.
Thank you, Council, for your questions. Mr. Mayor, we'll go to you now.
All right, thank you. Several of the things that have already been discussed, including the funds. I'm very pleased to see the funds in the planning department. As this is about our streetscapes, it's about appearances, it's about safety. So I'm very glad that has been restored in this budget. I had a question regarding Parks and Recreation's capital budget. I see that $524,500 is earmarked for capital projects. Yet I don't see where that, what's the plan, and maybe it's premature. We just had the Beechwood review, citizen input. I heard very good things about that process and the things that were suggested. So I don't know, Ms. Fields, is there anything you can share, or Mr. Michaels, regarding capital improvements in Parks and Rec?
Sure. I've got some high notes here. So in the plan coming up, we had a phase one of the Beechwoods master plan. We have a number there of 200,000. We're going to fix the picket fence over at the Berg for 10. We're looking at replacement or repair of Civic Center tennis courts. We've got Freeway Park PlayStation in there at 75 with some sidewalk repairs of 12 for a total project cost of 87. We're looking at a new roof at Inglenook Park on the bathrooms. We're looking at some interpretive trail systems and furnishings and signage over at Lincoln Woods. Miller Park, we're looking at baseball field improvements, fencing and painting. We've got a play structure at Seminole and a play structure at Stratford. This is all part of our next year to 3 year plan of replacing all the play equipment structures here in Southfield. We are looking at tennis court, pickleball, and basketball courts, both at Miller Park and Sims Park. And we'll be moving forward with that in the next couple of months. But I hope that answers your question.
Oh, Harry, that's great to hear. I'm really glad to hear that that level of detail. I'm wondering if there's when do you think, and it's not necessarily related to this budget, but when do you think the plan for Beechwood will go into effect?
Well, I can give you the general timeline right now. We have weekly reviews with OHM for the Beechwoods Master Plan. We have staff reviewing their project based on the input and engagement from community and our stakeholders. The following week, OHM will be presenting to the work group that has a number of folks from our city administration to some of the folks in our community. And then we are going to propose that we have one more community engagement with that final plan, Mayor, before bringing it to council. So the beginning, toward the end of June, we'll complete the process. So it would be, and don't quote me on this, the last week of June or the first week of July when presentation would come to council. And at that point in time, we will have had community engagement on several occasions, and we will give a reporting out. OHM will give a reporting out of all the steps that were taken to ensure that this plan really resonates what our residents want to see. So we look forward to it.
Again, thank you very much. The question that has been asked of me or to me, and didn't have enough information, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
That's it for you, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, there was one other thing. Austin, once again, you always do a beautiful job of giving us the high-level overview. Could you please send me the beginning PowerPoint, those slides, and perhaps the rest of the council would like them as well?
You mean the printed version? Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I have the budget you sent me. I'm talking about the the slides at the beginning of tonight's presentation.
Yep, those were emailed out to you, but I'm happy to print off a copy for you.
Okay, I think I missed it then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. City Administrator.
This is
Yes.
Councilman Mandelbaum. I had two more questions, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, not at all. Go ahead, Councilman.
This is I was looking at the organizational charts, and I noticed that in the Human Resource Department, we talked about a position for the diversity, equity, and inclusion position. It wasn't in the current org chart. Is that because you did a snapshot in time, or we haven't finalized where that position is going to sit? And if so, have we budgeted for that position in the next budget? Does that question make sense?
It absolutely does, and I would defer to City Administrator Zorn on that.
Yes, I think you hit it right. A snapshot of time upon the adoption of the position. We will need to take the budget, the appropriate budget action to fund the position. So it is not in what's in front of you. If the earlier draft, the budget was the last piece we needed to work out. Right now, what we presented to council, we did have the position working at the direction of a diversity executive council, but a direct report to human resources, in particular, the way we tied it to training, the initial assessment that would be completed of our workforce regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then a greater commitment to the required constant training that would be. So we've not finalized it. There will probably be some additional that would have to be a budget adjustment. Other budget adjustments will include the mechanics associated with the Northland deal. Austin, Mr. Michaels and I will need to spend some time with how those funds will go through the Brownfield, from the city to the Brownfield Authority. And there's one other item that I think could be a future budget adjustment, and I'm drawing a complete blank. But I hope that answered your question, Mr. Councilman Mandelbaum.
Yeah, it does. I just want to make sure we don't have, I think it was two years ago, we did a budget adjustment like a week after we approved the budget.
Yep.
I would hate to see that happen again. And
can I respond to that, if I may, Madam President? There's no shame in making a budget adjustment if the direction you're moving in, and we haven't finalized this, and there we respond to things. It'd be great to have that crystal ball, but we start putting this budget together, December, at first of the year. It moves from my office to April. There's still a lot of moving pieces on this.
I understand. I just want to make sure that we are trying to, forward think for the positions that we know we are going to be hiring this coming year. Extra positions, I should say.
Yep.
That's all. Another, and I appreciate the answer. So that does help. But another question I had as it relates to sanitation. How big is our reserved fund balance for sanitation?
Sure. So at June 30th of 2020, our sanitation reserve was at 809,000.
Okay.
And if I may, what's our total sanitation budget? Do you know offhand?
You can pull it up. But apparently not quickly. There it is. $3,095,000 is our proposed.
Okay, because my question goes back to what I'm always asking is requests that I always receive from multiple different neighborhoods is having the larger garbage cans like other communities have. And I know it's been a topic before, and I was just wondering if, I know we're in the middle of a long contract with GFL. I just didn't know if there was room to try to, maybe using some of that fund balance from sanitation to figure out a way to get the larger cans like we do with recycling.
I think, Madam President, when we looked at it, if I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I thought the expenditure was about a $550,000 expenditure, but it's also the renegotiating of the contract with GFL for the tipping. And let me just comment, I think there are 4 Rawsock communities that are their sanitation contracts expire. And monthly, I'm in a meeting and we monitor what's happening with rates, just to see. I think council's aware that we have an exceptionally, we were incredibly fortunate with the rate that we had. And
I think we were the lowest community out of everyone.
Yes, and I can get those numbers that we do, but I'm watching what happens with these other, I know it's definitely 4, it might be 5 communities that are going out to bid. And the types of things we look at, do they have, do you have to use that side? Can you, do they have the truck that pick it up? Will they get, can you only dump that truck? Can you continue to put out as much? Because those are the finer points of that. If sometimes when you have that can, that's all you can put out. And it costs extra if the community wants to have, it can be that can, and let's say you clean out the closets.
Yeah, I remember that it was an additional expense. That's why I was just wondering, if there was any thought into using maybe some of the fund balance to offset some of that extra cost that would most probably be passed on to the residents, but it wasn't a significant cost. I think it was $15 to $20 a year, so per resident. So I wasn't sure if there was an appetite for that, but you're right. There's many moving pieces involved.
We're happy to continue to monitor it, and you're correct. The fact is, the fund, we've done such a good job as Director Michaels made reference to. I'll use the brush chipping. We've produced a substantial savings there as well, and it's not just the cost of pickup tipping fees. Now there are a couple other threats, and one of them is Michigan. There's currently a bill to increase tipping fees in Michigan. One of the reasons why we get so much out-of-state trash in the state is our tipping fees are the lowest, one of the lowest in the Great Lakes region. So we'll continue to monitor this, and
Okay. Do we have any knowledge or any plans so far for the COVID money that we've received?
Thank you. That was the other item we forgot to budget. And Austin, do you want to talk about the rules that we just got and the first check?
Sure. So actually, just yesterday, we got our first ACH of 50% of the 9.8 million. We're expected to get the other 50% 12 months from now. Treasury put out a interim final rule that is not yet final. I believe it was last Monday. It's a 151-page document that we are still analyzing. And by we, I don't mean just us at the city. I mean everyone across the country. The American Rescue Plan provided direct assistance to 19,000 different communities, and we are all trying to figure out exactly what the rules are on how to spend it. Treasury has provided an FAQ, they've provided an overview, they've provided some general guidance on how you should spend it. My concern is the additional restrictions that could be placed on that when we go to do the reporting. Do we have to follow super circular? And I'm assuming the answer is yes. So there's a lot that we are still looking at. We have not yet formulated a budget for those funds. That is something that I would like to work on with council. We have, if you recall, approved a small amount of that already for the accelerator. But the bulk of it is not yet obligated. That's an ongoing conversation, pending the restrictions and the community's needs as well.
Okay.
Are you comfortable in talking about our lost revenues at this point? Because one of the things is replacing lost revenues, and we're not a community that has an income tax who had a lost revenue. We don't collect sales tax like some communities in the country locally. Do you want to touch on that?
Sure. So some of the guidance that Treasury put out, and they had initially said, this could be used as a revenue replacement. What we'll have to do is do an analysis looking back over a 4-year period, with the most recent year being the full fiscal year prior to the start of the pandemic. So that would be our fiscal 2019. We are allowed to then project those revenues forward and use the difference between that and our actual results to offset some of this money to recover those essentially. However, if you look at our revenues over the past 4 years, including the year we're currently in, it's not going to be millions of dollars. I think it will primarily relate to, like our building department, we see it there, and then our fees, licenses, and permits. But we have not seen, significant loss in those areas.
Okay, thanks. The last question I had is, I know that this has been talked about for a while, is improving our street lighting, moving to LEDs and things like that. How is that going? Is there money in the budget for that? I know that we were doing surveys and trying to find third parties to work with.
Madam President, if John can touch on that, John, the tie to the special assessment districts, if you want to touch on that and what we've done today?
Yes, sir. We are in the process still of evaluating the major roads in relation to special assessment districts. Everything is set. The locals are set. The big question is, how do we fairly pay for the major roads? And that's probably going to take the new assessor to help guide us through that.
And John, we'll have to have a discussion. We are very unique that we put street lighting on our water bills. And that's actually contrary to the what law says. I'm correct with that statement? If I'm wrong, I apologize.
We do put it on our water bills. That does make it at least difficult to perceive accurately at a minimum.
And then procedurally, we've as these districts, we have asked Miller Canfield several times to walk us through what the mechanics would look like. Here's our process, but there does exist a possibility that we may need to restate a number of these districts. Am I correct, John?
I believe there are corrections that need to be made. We did a great job when we put the districts together. Unfortunately, the maintenance on them was a little lacking as home combined. We need some of those corrections, but those are simply procedural. The big question now comes down to the fair way to pay for major street lighting. And is that billed to the adjacent property owners as we do for residential streets because the benefit is so local? Or do we share that amongst all property owners because obviously well-lit major streets are a benefit to all residents? That, I believe, is the major question that's holding us back right now, sir.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it, and I look forward to I guess working with the new assessor once we figure out how to get this all done. So I appreciate the opportunity to ask additional questions, and I did not say it before, but thank you, Austin and team. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator, do you have any additional comments or questions or?
Again, Madam President, I would like to thank Austin, his team, and all of our staff. Obviously, a lot always goes into the budget. We try to anticipate as much. We've touched on future items that will need to be budgeted. COVID, the most recent one, budget dealing with the diversity and equity position. And then we will be asking council to conduct a public hearing on Monday, June 14th. I believe the meeting starts at 5:30. And that is a date established within our city charter. And myself, the entire management team, we're happy to continue to answer questions between now and June 14th. We're 24 days away, so we're available to continue to field questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else on the phone have a comment regarding our budget? Or
Council
question?
President?
Yes.
Yes, there was one that I forgot to ask. To Austin, where in the budget is the revenues for the handicap parking patrol? Where is that reflected in the budget?
The handicap parking patrol, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Is that?
Austin, that would show up in the courts through code?
Because I don't see it in code. That's where I thought it would be, but there's nothing reflected in code. And I'm assuming that last year there was probably hardly anything, but in prior years there was a substantial revenue that was brought in through that
Ms. Banks?
program. Yes.
This is Dr. Calhoun. That revenue actually doesn't show up as a part of the city's revenue. It is actually forecasted to the court. It does not, the city doesn't capture handicap parking in that manner.
Okay, so to Austin, is that reflected in the court documents? The court budget?
Yes, that would be reflected in the court budget then.
Do you know like where that would be in the court?
I would assume under ordinance fees and costs.
Okay. All right, there it is. All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Austin, might there be a greater breakdown from the courts, not just that we can provide for Ms. Banks?
Of course, Renee Shalai does a fantastic job of tracking all of this.
It might be something that all of council would be interested in. I know probably last year, yeah, I see it. Well, looks like it was down, or wait a minute, is that this year? I don't know if what I'm talking about is all reflective in this ordinance fees and costs, but I would like to see a breakdown, if possible, please.
Yep. And I agree, it should go to the entire council.
Yes.
Okay.
I would assume last year's wasn't as high as previous years, but once we get back to normal, the dollar amount will go back up. Is that like assumption correct?
and that might be part of our take apart regarding the COVID revenue as we dig for lost revenues. Just to document to the federal government where we have had lost revenues compared to what we experienced the 4 previous years.
Right, and I was thinking of that, but
Yep.
you know, when you read the 151 page document, you might find it in there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone that I did not call that had a comment? Okay, well, hearing none, everyone, we can adjourn the meeting. So thank you very much for your time tonight.
Madam President?
Yes.
This is Myron.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Myron. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was muted and I didn't realize it. Is there anyone on a call that, I guess it would be from Public Works, that could tell about unanticipated costs related to flushables? Because I know Candace Miller was on the news one time, said that it was terrible amount that they had to spend to clear up the pumps because they jammed up the pumps.
Madam President, if I may address, this is AJ from DPW.
Yes, please.
We have not seen anything significant that has caused any impairments or any downtime with any of our equipment, our lift stations and like that. Although I do believe that an education, more education through PSA, maybe through cable and other outreach, social outreach programs, that we can help mitigate that, so that we don't incur that downtime and that money spent on flushables, because council member is right. It is a very serious issue.
Okay. One other last question or comment is in the head count. I noticed that there's a funded position for the assistant for the city for Fred Zorn. I would like to see somebody in that chair.
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is Councilman Manama. I missed it. What did you want to see?
City administrator assistant.
Ah, okay.
Concur.
Was there anything else? Any other comments, Mr. Frazier?
No, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I hear someone. Okay, I guess not. So again, I guess we can adjourn the meeting, and everyone have a good evening. Thank you very much for your time.